Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and the most recent Warcraft Direct gave us so much more info regarding the future of not only the War Within expansion, but also of the entire World Soul Saga, and even gave us a small preview about some of the new features we may expect from the expansion of Midnight, with them unveiling the player housing system, arguably one of the most exciting features coming out to World of Warcraft of any expansion ever. Definitely a feature that the community has been craving for multiple years now. And with that direct, we also got ourselves a bit of a content roadmap for the year of 2025, which features housing coming out, looks like towards the tail end of year 2025 in winter before the next year. However, housing feature is part of the Midnight expansion, which got a lot of players wondering if Midnight potentially might be coming out, at least in pre-patch form, much sooner than expected. And if Midnight were to come out early on, we would not be seeing Season 4 content, which is not present in the roadmap either. However, they're already hinting at some of the future content that could be a holdover update before the launch of Midnight. And that's essentially what I want to talk about in today's video. Could we see Midnight come out sooner, and what would the game look like with a faster content cycle while removing Season 4 update? As always, if you guys want to see more regular War Within updates and World Soul Saga updates, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. But otherwise, let's dive right in. So during the Warcraft Direct, we got a lot of information and a ton of exciting preview regarding the future of WoW, whether we talk about the War Within expansion and the future updates to come, or just when it comes to the overall World Soul Saga and the 3 expansions that are part of this big storyline. And some info from the Direct, specifically when it comes to the actual roadmap of the 2025, actually tells us that the expansion of Midnight, which didn't really get highlighted in crazy detail during the Direct, except for the exciting preview of player housing, but that expansion could, and this is a very much a maybe, possibly be coming out a lot sooner than anybody has expected, and with possibly a lot less downtime and even less content drought and holdover patches, which would mean a much faster cadence of content for the entire WoW community, which is going to be way above any expectations. But that might have actually been their goal going forward, because there was an interview conducted in 2023 where they've actually talked about possibly speeding up the content cadence when it comes to the World Soul Saga specifically. I'm kind of paraphrasing the quote, but I do have it on the screen though. Essentially, they said they don't want to rush it, but they also don't want to take longer than necessary, as right now they have 2 teams, one working on War Within, as well as future updates, with us getting the preview for the Undermined update of 11.1, but also the smaller updates like the 0.5s, like the 20th anniversary, 0.7, the Siren Isle, and the future 0.5 and 0.7s that follow Undermined, the Season 2 and the Season 3 content that's going to be arriving later, and all the other 0.5, 0.7 patches of that update as well. And then a separate team working on Midnight specifically, making sure that they get the very base foundations of that expansions out of the way, but likely also working on improvements and features of that expansion, as well as how they may take some of the evergreen stuff they've added for War Within, things like maybe the hero talents and the delves and how that potentially may evolve in the future, or what other features they could add. So there's separate teams working on 2 different versions of the game, one for the now and one for the future. As part of the Warcraft Direct, while not a lot of information was given regarding Midnight as an expansion, with its features, with its content, the storyline, exactly where we will go, they did give us a preview of the housing update, which is a major feature that has been much requested by the community for literal expansions and literal years. The customizability of having your own personalized space and just how you'll be able to decorate it, but also having different themes, different types of homes, where you could place those homes, all of those things players have wanted for a long while. And the fact that it's coming out as part of the expansion of Midnight is pretty unbelievable, especially if this thing were to come out sooner than expected, because that just means it's such a short time away. And for some players, just the fact that player housing is coming to WoW, and specifically as part of Midnight, that already is enough to make Midnight the best expansion for them immediately. We haven't even touched it, haven't even played the content or anything, but that means it's literally the best thing they've ever experienced. The roadmap, however, does give us some more info regarding when Midnight might be coming out. We know that more general info will be given on Midnight during the summer of 2025. So until then, I imagine we'll hear some previews and some maybe even teasers about Midnight, but nothing set in stone up until that date. However, towards the tail end of that same roadmap, we also have a housing icon, which was initially a cryptic icon. Players were trying to figure out exactly what it was, and then eventually Blizzard decided just to give us a very detailed version. Yes, it is a proper housing icon, which means that the housing update may be dropping towards the tail end of 2025. And housing update being part of the Midnight expansion means that maybe Midnight as an expansion, maybe as part of its pre-patch update, may be arriving with a late 2025 as well, which means that's a lot earlier than we've seen with other pre-patch updates and even expansion updates in general, where most of those are released around August or November, with the pre-patch maybe a month before that, sometimes even two, depending on that expansion. And if that housing part update is part of Midnight and not to be separated as its own standalone feature that's meant to arrive with Midnight and then develop through Midnight, if that is meant to arrive together, as it seems like it's going to be a major part of that expansion specifically, then it possibly means that the new expansion may be arriving sometime in winter 2025 or 2026, but way sooner than anybody would have expected. And that'll be very unusual, because that would mean season 4 content like we've had for previous expansions just wouldn't exist. But I guess the question is, do we necessarily really even need season 4? Because season 4 doesn't really even show up in the roadmap either. In fact, the roadmap lists a bunch of different updates from the upcoming 1107, which we know a lot of and can test it on PTR, the Plunderstorm update, the patch 11.1 Undermined update, the patch 8.2, which got a new zonal update, but also all the seasonal things that we're used to as part of the season 3 content. And then in the tail end, they have the housing icon with a very fell green background, and that fell green is especially important because they've actually got asked about it in an interview. And if that housing update is meant to be a part of the Midnight expansion, that means there wouldn't be much room for proper season 4 content. And I guess my question is, are they skipping season 4 this time around? And which wouldn't be the worst in my opinion, because when you think about it, over the last few expansions, we haven't had a proper seasonal update when it comes to season 4 for a very long time. In fact, since the expansions of Legion as well as Battle for Azeroth. Just going back in history and taking a look at the expansions, Legion was one that was filled with a ton of different content, from the Emerald Nightmare update as well as the Nighthold and Trial of Valor in between of the two. Then we had a whole raid of Tumors of Garrus for season 3, and then season 4 came with Antaurus, the Burning Throne. But with it came a proper season of Mythic Plus, multiple seasons of PvP, but PvP was structured very differently. But it had a full array of content, a proper tier raid, and all the different things you could expect out of a proper seasonal update. Every season came in with something new, major updates, new legendaries, and new content. Whether it is open world content or seasonal content, there was always something to look forward to. Even Battle for Azeroth as an expansion, which a lot of people are looking back at BFA right now a lot more fondly. People that played way back at BFA, doing the island grinds wasn't fun. Corruption stuff wasn't fun. Grinding all your alts with all the AP wasn't fun. But now everybody's looking back at it a lot more fondly. Just something I wanted to note. But that one started off with Odira Season 1. Battle for the Zaralor as part of the Season 2, with a Crucible Storm in between, heading into Eternal Palace as part of the Season 3. And even though Season 4 content didn't get a brand new zone like the Season 3 with Eternal Palace, Ny'alotha did create new invasions within a couple of zones, but also added a whole gearing system of corruptions, which was massive. On top of all the Azeroth gear and necklaces and Heart of Azeroth stuff that you were working with, it was a pretty big shift and changed the game in a pretty drastic way, but also added a fairly long raid tier with N'Zoth as the final boss. Now, you could say anything you want to about how that raid worked out, because the ending of N'Zoth was all over the place, but at the very least it gave us content, it gave us something to do for a proper Season 4 update. And we haven't really had a proper Season 4 since. Shadowlands had a holdover Season 4, with the first 3 seasons being really the focus, and then 4th one allowing you to replay old raids and old dungeons, but in a very familiar way. It wasn't that new of an experience, it was more or less more of the same. Dragonflight is another one that I actually enjoyed as an expansion, but also Season 4 just give us more of the same. Vault Incarnates, Aberrus, and Emergencell on a rotation, and we could choose our tier sets, we got to acquire more cosmetics, and that was fun, but it was just a holdover season, though it didn't have nearly as much drive and passion as, let's say, Season 3 of Dragonflight had. And the amount of players that played it, especially for Mythic Plus content, there's a fairly large numerical change difference between the excitement of Season 3 and Season 4. So all of these updates can definitely be fun on their own, but they're a holdover update. They're just giving us something to do until the next major update, the next expansion, the next thing that we're going to be playing into. Though Dragonflight did have other holdover content, such as Mists of Pandaria Remix, which I think was a great little replacement to do alongside Season 4 content, and that is something that I very much enjoyed. It gives you something different that's still very much World of Warcraft. You're still hanging out and doing all the things in WoW, still playing similar classes but in a different way, this time through Mists of Pandaria zones, Mists of Pandaria raids, dungeons, and powering up your character through a variety of different fun ways while earning a ton of different cosmetics. And honestly, I think that was my favorite part of Season 4 of Dragonflight, specifically the Mists of Pandaria remix, which was a fantastic bit of holdover content. With Season 4 being a patch that's mostly a holdover update until the next expansion, that's the time where a lot of people take a break. Dragonflight Season 4 with WoW Remix was really the only thing that kept a lot of players playing during that time, but the participation within dungeons and raids during that season, based on the numbers we have of websites that track that info, was notably much lower compared to the rest of them. And a lot of players publicly voiced that they would rather have no downtime rather than a holdover patch. I mean, I guess it's better to have something to do compared to nothing to do, but most players prefer proper seasonal content rather than one that's there to hold you over until the next big thing. So possibly in the future, they could just skip out on Season 4 entirely and make more room for Midnight to arrive a little bit earlier than expected if we are to go off of the newest roadmap for 2025. Though that same roadmap also does have a bit of this fell green hint towards the tail end, and they actually asked Ian about it in one of the different interviews that they've given ever since they had the Warcraft Direct, where in that interview he answered that anything is possible. There's some fell green tinge at the right of that map. Who knows what that could mean? And I mean, it's obviously them teasing at a potential Legion remix to possibly be on the horizon, or some kind of another update, but it's very likely we could be getting a Legion remix. And I think the success of Mists of Pandaria remix allows them to possibly try more expansions to remix in the near future. And Legion as an expansion was a very memorable experience, very similar to that of Mists of Pandaria, as a lot of people that played Legion have very fond memories of that expansion. Legion as an experience had a lot of raids and dungeons for us to dive back into, and to bring it back for remix I think would be perfect. And Legion was the expansion where Mythic Plus dungeons were born, and that is where the fledgling Mythic Plus system got to have its legs and grow onto where it's at right now in the War Within expansion. Imagine what Legion could do with a Mythic Plus system, but a part of the Legion remix. So imagine if we had characters as strong as they were in MoP remix, and players decided to try and push Legion M Plus system as MoP remix characters with infinite power and infinite potential. So many gems with so many classes becoming literally nearly invincible. You'll be able to really push those dungeons up until almost infinity, until you hit that breaking point where if an enemy just looks at you, you die at an instant. And I think that could be really fun, very Diablo-like pit experience, but within World of Warcraft. Very fun, but also very broken at the same time, where you get to create the most busted character ever and try to push your way through Mythic Plus dungeons up until you hit your very limit. And I think that would be very fun as something to do in an off-season as a less competitive feature, just to see how far a character could possibly push their luck as well as their builds in the future. Plus, also think about the different cosmetics you could earn within Legion Remix. Suramar in particular, with the whole Nighthold aesthetic, had so many different weapons and armor pieces that were added into the game files, but never added as things that our players could equip or wear or earn, and those things are still somewhere in the game files to this day, which can be brought in as a reward, as a cosmetic going forward within Legion Remix. And just think of the Legion Mage Tower. That whole thing, the Mage Tower had a lot of potential back in Legion. A lot of players enjoyed it and loved it and really did it for a lot of the different cosmetics, and this could be the opportunity to add some new or even bring back some old cosmetics back into the game. Now, I know Blizzard themselves said they're likely not going to be bringing in any of the challenge rewards from previous expansions, even though everybody in the community, or at least a large portion of the community, would want to see stuff like that make a return. However, in the game files, they also do have unused versions of just about every single artifact weapon from back in Legion. Like, there was a lot of different designs for artifact weapons made way back in the day, but not all of them were implemented and added properly. And so some of those weapons are actually still just floating in the game files, never been used, and could potentially be brought in as a possible unique reward for completing the Mage Tower within Legion Remix, which I think would be incredible. And the power progression of Legion I think could be incredibly fun, because that was the best part about MoP Remix, making the most broken character with the best gems and the best gear, and absolutely steamrolling through any content in front of you, no matter the difficulty, no matter the challenge. And I think that could totally do something like this in Legion Remix as well, where Miss Pandaria had the cloak that you had to level up. In Legion, they could give you an artifact weapon or a replica weapon to level up through a variety of different activities, and that weapon could grow stronger and stronger with your character, which would be actually incredible. As well as, instead of Mr. Pandaria gems that we had back in Remix, you could just switch it out with Legion legendaries, because that was a pretty big feature of this expansion. Towards the tail end of Legion, you could just go up and buy some of these legendaries, but a lot of them had a variety of different effects. Some were class specific and some were more general baseline changes. And a lot of them had very, very powerful combos and very, very powerful effects. Some even grant you talents that you normally wouldn't be able to acquire unless you had that legendary equipped. But at the time, legendaries were kind of like the ultimate power fantasy of that expansion, and that is something they could pull on and utilize within WoW Remix or Legion Remix version. So instead of the gems from Mr. Pandaria, just swap it with legendaries. It would need to change a lot of them and adjust them, but you can apply so many powerful, busted, absolutely broken effects to many of these. But imagine the potential you could have by having like maybe a legendary that increases your mobility, a legendary for defense, legendary for power, legendary for how your cooldowns are utilized, a legendary to give you a bunch of different procs, and there's so many different effects you could implement and really juice them up to an 11, because if it's Remix, it's PvE content, you're not really worried about balance, you can really go all out and focus on the fun rather than have finely tuned gameplay and just let players absolutely break the game in two with just how powerful they can grow their character. And I think stuff like this would be really, really exciting to see, and I think would be a much, much better holdover update instead of having a proper Season 4 update and the Season 4 raids, Season 4 dungeons that most people don't really enjoy playing to begin with. Having Legion Remix replace that and then have us head into the war with an expansion, I think would actually be something that I personally would want to see, and I think it would be a perfect little update as a slight holdover for a few months until we get to dive into the next chapter of World Soul Saga, which I think would be perfect. But with everything being said, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did enjoy it or found it informative, go ahead and give it a like. I would very, very much appreciate it. Join our Discord community if you want to continue this discussion going forward and get regular War Within and World Soul Saga updates. Also, let me know what are your thoughts. Would you want to see Season 4 in the future as a holdover update, or just remove it and give us midnight a little bit earlier than usual? And as always, I'll see all of you guys in the next one.